Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Workday Chats today. I'm Mike Magaro, your host for today's session. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments below. Today, I'm joined by Ameet Bhojwani, Workday Adaptive Planning Leader at Deloitte, and Dave Sohigian, Global CTO at Workday. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As everyone here has likely felt, the pandemic has had a dramatic impact on the way we work. Seemingly overnight, IT teams needed to help their organization shift seamlessly to remote and distributed ways of working, and finance needed to quickly respond to disruption and changing market conditions. With the continuous changes of this uncertain environment and the rapid pace of digital acceleration, the relationship between the Office of the CFO and the Office of the CIO has never been more essential for success. We wanted to have this conversation with you today to discuss the evolution of this partnership and how finance and IT can collaborate to support key business objectives. Let's begin with a few questions to get this conversation started. Let's start with, why is a strong partnership between finance and IT more crucial than ever? And how has this relationship between finance and IT changed since 2020? Ameet, if you don't mind, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, no, for sure. The fact of the matter is that IT and finance have always needed to collaborate. If you look at the last decade or so, with the speed at which cloud has been adopted, the speed at which there's been innovation, there's always been a need to do that. I would say that we expect, even going forward, as organizations are looking at flexible ways to innovate, as they're looking at operating in a more agile manner, the need for this is even more. I would say, as organizations are deploying things in a more agile manner, what's happening is IT is needing to make investments quickly, innovate. Finance can't be making investments just the way they have been, right? If you look at even today, the focus has moved from capital expenditures to operating expenses because just everything is on the cloud. The speed at which expenses need to be deployed has changed. So that sort of agile, more quick way to interact between IT and finance is the reason they need to even be more collaborative.
Great points. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree, Ameet, that agility has become even more important. And I think that the pandemic certainly underlined this. If you didn't get the point that you need to be able to adapt because of the pandemic, you were probably hiding under a rock somewhere. And this was particularly true for IT, right? IT fully understood they needed to be able to adapt quickly. And I think Ameet's point is really good, that agile adoption, the digital transformation, and has really been brought to the forefront because in many cases, they weren't given a choice at all. You had to figure out, how are you going to be able to close the books without being in the office? And that really underlined, well, cloud systems can help with that, and systems where you can adapt quickly to increase demand or decrease demand really matter, and being able to do that that future forecasting, that planning in a really changing environment is really valuable. So I think, as much as anything, if you ask, well, why do they need to be more agile, the pandemic certainly underlined that. But it's always been about the business objectives and what you're trying to do. The pandemic underlined, you're trying to survive in many cases is what you're trying to do. Right. So it said, well, here's a good example of why. But obviously that shouldn't be the entire reason that you're looking at updating your systems.
Yeah, and really good points. I mean, I know that my own experience, we quickly went into, how do we get the best visibility we can in the business as quickly as possible? And then how do we look at our planning process differently, given a lot of uncertainty? And we actually had to make a lot of changes in the way we looked at things, and using technology was a big part of that. And so the partnership with IT, I know from my perspective, was hugely valuable.
Yeah, one of my like the number one thing that we heard from our clients last year was, hey, we used to have that quarterly forecasting and annual budgeting. By the way, we don't care about annual budgeting anymore. We want to do monthly forecasting because it's important to us, right? It's changing so quickly, and macroeconomic factors is driving that agility. I want monthly forecasting. If I need to simplify how I do it, I'm okay to do that as long as I can get a monthly forecast that's accurate.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because while I would say I experienced something similar where we really had a kind of micro focus on the short term, I actually think the pandemic for us actually changed the way we thought about the long term as well. And it really changed a lot of processes that we put in place to be more strategic and purposeful about the investments we were going to make and what the expected longer term return would be. And that was a completely new dynamic. And I don't think, I think it would have happened, but it definitely got accelerated through this last year.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, that it's how do you take advantage of the flexibility that was absolutely required during the pandemic? So to Ameet's point, do you want to continue forever doing monthly forecasts? It sounds like a bit of a burden, right? But whenever some sort of shock to your system, and could be a merger, could be some other crisis that only affects your industry or just growth that you're trying to do, that you can make that choice. You can say, all right, let's do some forecasting now in real time, rather than, hey, this is a once a year when we're forced to, and it's a big production to do it. So it's those companies, I really feel those companies that take advantage of what was forced upon them by the pandemic to be more agile in that way.
Yeah, really great examples. What do you guys think then when you think about the Office of the CIO and the Office of the CFO? What do you think shared priorities look like between the two? Dave, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so there is some history there, of course, between CFOs and CIOs. Often, if you looked back 10 years ago, certainly my experience in working with CIOs is that they, 50% of the time, at least in the US, they would report to the CFO. But that's much less the case today. They've gotten a lot more independence, and they're often reporting directly up to the CEO, and have I don't know whether it was considered more power, but a lot more influence because of the transformation that needed to happen, and often partnering with the CFO and the entire C-suite has become a really big priority. I think this is part of that evolution of the role of the CIO, from the plumber who was just making sure things worked, and the CFO would look at it as, oh, there's that cost center. Let's try to keep things under control there, to a really important connector technology-wise, and then stepping up from that. Now, as many systems have gone into the cloud, really for more what would be considered the soft skills in the IT department of, what information needs to flow back and forth? What are the processes? How do we connect these things, not just the technical side of that? And often I say that CIO is the person who has the broad understanding of the underpinnings of the entire organization, because they have no choice. They need to know everything about all the systems, which means they need to have a good business understanding of every part of the business. And the CFO, of course, wants to be part of that, to be able to understand more than just how to close the books, here's the finances, but like, how are we doing as a business, and where are their problem spots? So that partnership, I think, is a really solid one that makes a lot of sense. And the organizations where that is, there's a lot of respect and understanding between the Office of the CFO and the CIO, I think stand a much better chance at success.
But actually, just to follow up on that, Dave, you bring up a really interesting point that I don't, it probably is still the case in a lot of organizations, but it has changed. That role of the reporting structure of the head of the CIO reporting to the CFO, like, that has evolved. Why do you think that's been so important that that's evolved and created this separate, I would argue, more strategic structure?
Well, I don't know, Ameet might have a take on that too. I'll look to him first.
I would say, so there are two perspectives I want to share, right? One of them is what I'm seeing with our clients that are, call it, mid to enterprise clients. what is happening is how the organization is structured is changing. What I'm seeing is that there are executives that have, over the course of their career, been in finance roles and technology roles, call it light technology roles, where the board is saying, I don't necessarily need two people that are having to always collaborate. So why don't we just merge this position and have one CFO, CIO, not for super large organizations, enterprise organizations, but mid to enterprise, and then have a team of people that are helping support them that have more technical acumen or functional finance acumen. That's one way. The other thing that I would say, the other point of view that I would share is, listen, the idea of the digital experience, analytics, cloud, and all these enabling technologies, the reason why they are there is to enable finance to make better business decisions, right? And also enable the organization to be able to achieve the direction set forth by the board or the execs, right? The CEO. All of this cannot happen. It has to happen in conjunction with the CIO and CFO's leadership. None of that is going to happen without that collaboration. The future, the disruptors, Deloitte has this tech trends report that we release every year. What we are seeing is that digital reality, cognitive technologies, blockchain, these are already here. If you as an organization are not innovating and not getting there as soon as you can to take advantage of them, you're not going to be seen as a leader. So how do you take advantage of this? Like finance needs to help drive some of the ROI. Are we deploying capital properly? Are we innovating fast enough to help support IT in order to help us innovate? Like all of these reasons are the reasons why they just need to be lockstep, right?
That's really interesting. Do you in the situation? So I hadn't heard that before, and obviously you have a window into a whole bigger world than I do. But I hadn't heard that there are in smaller organizations, CFOs that do both roles, the CIO and the CFO. That's really interesting. How have you seen that actually work?
What I would say, so this is a client of mine, and by the way, they are a Workday client as well, who are using adaptive planning to do sales forecasting, S&OP planning, as well as FP&A. Now, the CFO there, when they grew up in their career, they actually had technology roles within the CIO's organization as they were growing their career. So they have a good foundation, understanding, but is not deep enough. So what did she do? She hired a bunch of technical directors that would help her be successful, help them be successful. And what I'm seeing is the pace at which they are undergoing a transformation is much faster than a traditional organization because it's one person reporting to the CEO making the decisions, right? So quick things are happening much faster than traditional organizations where they may be at the same level, but there's still lots of collaboration, lots of consensus building, lots of all of that needs to still happen.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Dave, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept too. That I think it does underline the shifting role of the CIO. So even if it is a separate function, that as you start to move towards cloud systems, especially software as a service, your job is more making sure you've got the right systems in place, doing due diligence for sure, integration work. But a lot of it is just managing vendors, making sure the systems are operational. It's not coding. It's not building stuff directly. And I think that there is in some ways, the situation you're describing with a customer sort of underlines that. It's not something that a CFO/CIO is probably going to go to first. I'm going to get some people and I'm going to build some stuff is not the thing that she's probably saying. It's more like, what's the business problem I'm trying to solve? Do I have systems today, or can I purchase systems where this can be configured into the system? And so I think there's some real benefits to that. Obviously, there's still a huge role for the highly technical CIO. That will always be the case at lots of organizations, just a requirement depending on the business you're in. I did talk with a CIO just yesterday that I was asking about, what's the story with your financial systems, and they had just hired a CFO, and what's motivating a potential change there, and he said, it's a business outcome we're looking for. That's it. Number one, not cloud, not anything else. It's business outcomes we're looking for. We need to know that it's going to have effect on top line or bottom line, or or efficiency. That's what we're after. And so that becomes very much a merging of goals. The CFO is after outcomes as well, business outcomes, and the CIO is too. And I think that's something we've seen, even if it's not a merged role. I've definitely seen there are very few CIOs I run into anymore who are just technical back, doing, down in the weeds, doing the plumbing. It just doesn't happen that much anymore.
Yeah. The example I think we're using right here is a smaller company. Does that dynamic change as Ameet, you've dealt with large companies and the complexities of moving with purpose and speed, right, to do all the digital acceleration that one wants to do? What are some of the things you're seeing?
What I would say is the way the organization is structured is because what happens is, we talk about agility. At the same time, we have let's take a large bank, for example. The bank has many different revenue streams. They have capital markets, they have retail, they have commercial, they have a whole bunch of different businesses running. All of them are seen as individual businesses. What I'm seeing is a lot of those businesses are seen as individual businesses. And the reason why they're seen as such is because they want decision making to be done sooner, faster, in an agile manner. So what am I seeing there? I'm seeing all of those groups have CFOs and CIOs in all of those organizations because they want the ability to drive change and innovation to be just the way they are being disrupted, right? So in organizations where I see, the one common, one person, playing that role. In larger organizations, I see a lot more roles, right? So it's so different, right? The way the organizations are working. So there's almost a committee of CIOs and CFOs that are reporting into the CEO on a weekly, biweekly, monthly basis, talking about all the products and services that they're making available to their customers. And at the end of the day, what I'm hearing a lot from customers is we are finding creative ways to finance innovation. What's happening is IT has always been in that mindset that we are going to keep the lights on. That mindset is shifting. The mindset to I'm going to spend 60% of my budget on keeping the lights on is shifting to the budget to keep the lights on because I'm leveraging cloud technologies, so on and so forth. That's going to shift to it's going to keep running, but I'm going to spend 40% of my budget on innovation and driving innovation in my organization because otherwise we'll be disrupted.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's great to hear.
Oh.
Dave, were you going to say something?
No, it's great.
Yeah. So this we're talking about kind of the partnership, and I just want to expand upon this a little bit. So what do the both of you think are some of the ways that finance and IT can actually strengthen the partnership, work to accelerate together innovation, and stay aligned? Because I think that's the hardest thing, is that especially with business these days, it's moving at such a fast pace. I've found how critical communication is cross-functionally to get the outcomes that you want. So when we're thinking about finance and IT strengthening their partnerships, working more closely together to drive innovation and also staying aligned as things change. What are some of the things that you guys see or that you would recommend? And then also, if you could also tie in any best practices, Ameet, that you've seen that help kind of manage through conflicting viewpoints and drive kind of that consensus so that things can move forward.
Maybe I'll start with the geeky answer, which is the data. And if one of the biggest things that drives the siloed nature of organizations is your own view of the world, and often that's driven by just right down at its core, different data. We're looking at different information because we're looking at different systems or different cuts of the data. As Ameet was mentioning, like if you've got 10 CIOs that for each, one for each division, and CFOs, there's no way they're looking at a common set of data and so they don't have a common understanding of what their organization is. They may have a understanding of their silo, but that's it. And this is even true for smaller organizations where there's big walls between HR and IT and finance and the sales organization, the marketing organization. And so getting that data straight is shocking how much of an effect this has on relationships, because it makes everybody interdependent. If they're all using same systems, same data, they're having to coordinate on these things. And this is why I think this is one of the most important roles for the CIO in this new reality, is being that connector through systems and data. Because CIOs have never had a choice of having to be in the center of all of that and having to rationalize all the data. But they can also be, because of what Ameet said before, of, well, if this is just cloud systems and you're not, having to build all the stuff, they can help with pulling down those walls between all the different groups. So one of the best ways for a CIO to strengthen the relationship to the CFO is to strengthen the relationships between the CFO and all of the other executives by making the systems talk to each other, or having a common data model, common security model. Making that consistency means, like, we're going to be talking about it. If you're dependent on HR to give you the straight facts on how many people work there and how much that costs, then you're going to have a relationship between the CHRO and the CFO. If you're not, if you just everything runs independently, that's fine. You'll just go and ask IT if they've got the latest numbers.
Yeah, you called this, you're going to give the geeky answer. So I'm going to follow up with something that is related. The M&A is happening a lot, right? In this environment right now, there's a lot of consolidation going on. There's a lot of, innovative companies that are getting acquired. That is creating a huge challenge for what you just described.
Yeah.
And it is not easy. There's not an easy solution there. What I don't know if Ameet, because you see a lot, with the companies that you work with at Deloitte, but how are companies then embracing that challenging of that kind of single source of data when there's acquisitions going on and different systems needing to be kind of integrated or tied together?
I can share a perspective. My perspective is we keep hearing this over and over again, but you can't understate it, right? Which is the foundation of any organization that is acquiring other organizations needs to be strong, right? What kind of systems have you implemented in order to have a strong foundational data model, right? I'll use that term. What kind of systems are there to keep your lights on in your current organization in terms of financial reporting, timely close of books, tools and technologies that you're made available to your executives in order to make decisions, right? If all of those things are as expected, as organizations are, so that's one, which also includes the ability for them to quickly integrate any organization that they are acquiring, as an example, right? So for example, I know one of my clients it's a transportation company, and they're getting bigger. They're acquiring other transportation companies as a result. But before they acquire a company, the first thing they go and check is this company's infrastructure and data and information very easily able to integrate with Workday, right? Because it's important. I don't want to spend a whole year trying to figure out whether the decision I made was the wrong decision and that even though this company's financials look really good, were they disciplined enough to have the right data, investments? Were they run the way I expected them to run? Forget the financials. I'm assuming that their financials are okay, right? But do they have the right plumbing in order for them to then integrate into my organization?
Yeah, that's so incredible. That's so critical. Not a lot of companies have the discipline to do that up front, but it is so critical. Just Ameet, kind of staying with you. So what are some best practices then that you're seeing where you've seen companies do a really good job, of strengthening that partnership between finance and IT, managing through the conflicting viewpoints, right? So when there are important initiatives that are trying to move forward, but obviously a lot of people have different points of view through this process, are there any best practices that you would share with us today that really help?
I would say the number one, point that I would make is, at the end of the day, everybody has a shared value and a shared direction in terms of what they're trying to achieve as an organization. Anytime there's a conflict, the first thing that you need to go back to see is, what are the executives that are running this organization? What are the board of directors? What is their vision? Is what we're doing today aligning to that vision, right? To me, that is the basis of consensus building, right? If you have a conflict, let's go back to what we as an organization think is important to us.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm noticing a lot these days, which is also helping with the consensus building, is that there's a blur of internal boundaries between finance, HR, IT, and these organizations that are essentially running the company, right? So I'm finding that you have IT business partners embedded with finance, running finance, and the same way you will find finance folks embedded with IT. So you almost have this amalgamation of organizations all working together because all the stakeholders are working together and making decisions together. It's not IT versus finance. Right. Everybody's doing it together because now folks are embedded in those organizations that eventually then go report to the CEO.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I think that the cloud systems really help in terms of enabling that, because they take, in many cases, some of the technical aspects out of it, so that the business can be, when I say the business, just everything outside of IT can handle a lot of the capabilities themselves. And so the skills that were required in the past for the technical skills from IT aren't nearly as critical for running those systems. Now, I say that, but at the same time, there are a whole nother set of skills that IT has always had that are considered kind of soft skills. Change management, for example, how to think about processes and manage those throughout an organization. Those really come to the fore, and there is added weight in the business to understand more about those things. So IT still has an incredibly critical role, perhaps I would argue even more important, even as the systems become less technical to manage. And to Ameet's point, this is the way to manage that is to make sure that there is a blending and a shared responsibility for running the business and the technology underpinning those decisions.
Yeah, I really love that comment, Ameet, of just kind of bringing it back up. Any conflict, bring it back up to what the strategic goals are, and get that alignment up top, and then everything else kind of flows from there. I think that's a really good point. We all know technology is changing at a very rapid pace, so I would love your guys' point of view on what you think the impacts of machine learning, true kind of wall-to-wall automation, AI have on finance and IT functions, and how organizations today are preparing for that. I don't know, Ameet, if you want to start.
Yeah, I would say what's happening is organizations If you think of retail, right, and you think of how we interact with devices, the Google devices and the, Apple devices of the world, businesses today want to run business the same way they are running their personal lives. Very simple, right? The other thing that is happening is, just as we expect these technology companies to make our lives day-to-day easy, right? Be able to talk to our refrigerator, order groceries, whatever it is, the same way technology is expecting to be able to interact with the tech, or businesses are expected to interact with technologies. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are mundane tasks that our clients are doing today that we are within finance automating using robotic automation processes. Leading companies like yourselves are investing so much more in terms of AI, automation, etc., so that the day-to-day mundane tasks within finance, technology, supply chain, sales become a lot more easier, right? If I enter a budget or a forecast that does not make sense based on how history has been and based on how actuals are being generated, I expect, the future, expects that the technology is going to say, hey, by the way, this sales number doesn't make sense. So before you commit to this, these are some of the things that you need to go and investigate, right? So that's what I'm talking about, which is, using cognitive technologies and AI to help me make better business decisions, because I have so much going on. I want somebody to tell me, hey, there's something wrong here, go investigate, right? That's basically how it's going to change our lives. The same way Google and Apple have changed our lives, we expect technology companies like yourselves to make our lives easy by going and telling us, hey, you're making a mistake, right?
Yeah, and I definitely agree that is the vision for machine learning. The reality, though, for many companies is it starts again with the data. The data is a mess, and guess what? You can't stick automation on top of bad data and expect better results. That's just speeding up a broken process, which is not the goal. But even once you get that data right, I think every CIO out there that's listening right now will know that they've taken on an ML project at some point, a pilot, right, where they said, we want to try out this tech. We're going to see how this stuff works. And they tried it out on a specific use case with a particular data set that they had curated. And what do you know? It worked pretty well. And they're really excited about this, or like they're excited about maybe the vendor that they bought that from. They're promoting this with their CFO and CEO and CHRO and saying, this is really cool stuff. And then they try on a real project. They scale the thing up and it falls on its face. And the reason why is, one, because of the data, and second, because of use cases that make it really difficult to scale up machine learning. Because when you're in a very controlled environment, it's easy to make those decisions. And all of this underlines that agility, going back to where we started with the flexibility and the ability to adapt over time. This really applies for machine learning, because you're going to have to take on, as Ameet was referring to, some of those really routine tasks, those really mundane tasks. That's where you're going to get your initial wins. The brilliant machine learning we see out of the consumer internet companies that Ameet was referring to, that is hundreds, thousands of machine learning algorithms, all sort of doing a little piece here and there until they add up to look like magic. Organizations are going to need to do the same thing. They're going to need to try this out in little places, here, there, and everywhere, and build up those algorithms over time. And we've certainly learned that at Workday as we've taken on more and more machine learning use cases. It is absolutely the future for us, and we feel the industry, but it's a crawl, walk, run when it comes to building out these algorithms. Otherwise, they end up making bad decisions really, really quickly, which is not the goal.
Where is business on that journey? Like, is this still the second inning kind of along that path?
I think it depends on the industry and also the organization's needs. So in certain organizations and industries, surprising ones like manufacturing, they have a huge need on the manufacturing side for machine learning that solves like some serious problems and is very effective. In other organizations where it is mostly people driven, those, machine learning is much more fraught. You try to build a recruiting, algorithm, and you're going to run into questions about bias really quickly. So it becomes much more challenging in those areas. So I think a lot of it really depends on the industry, the maturity of the organization, but and also the problems they're trying to solve. But I think we're going to see this just sort of being in little places all over. And again, just building up over time to the point where you say, what's your machine learning strategy? Like, what? Like that's asking, what's my computer strategy or what's my technology? Like there isn't one. It's just we use the stuff just like everybody else, and we're using it wherever possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other point that we don't frequently talk about, and maybe it's something that we'll talk about today, is the talent, right? What are organizations doing in order to be ready for this change that is basically being thrust at them, right? How are they hiring people? How are universities training finance and technologists to be better equipped for this change that is coming, right? And what we're finding is that when we are hiring as well, I find finance and accounting majors with deep technical Java, Python, R experience that they've been like programming that as they've been learning in schools, right? So when these folks join our organizations, they're already thinking how technology is going to make my life easy. They're not thinking how my reports or how my month end is going to be is going to happen, or how many days in I'm going to be. They're thinking about how quickly can I close the books, and how quickly can I let my bosses know where the problem is, right? And they're using technology to do that every day. They're not thinking about how fast I can close the books anymore, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, and you nailed the transition to our final topic. So well done by you. But that is the focus here that we're gonna close on, is just how are the skills changing in what's necessary for the future of IT and finance professionals. And Ameet, you just hit on some really good examples. I know that I see within the FP&A org, there are a lot of differences that I think what we're going to need over the next 5 years or in the future versus what we've historically needed to be successful. I'll say one of those has been like, yes, you need finance people to be really good at numbers and the roll up of the quarter and all that stuff. But that is definitely less important than the ability to cross-functionally communicate, the ability to be strategic in terms of partnering with the business in a different way, to ask the right questions, to challenge. It is definitely evolving. I don't know, Dave, what are you seeing and what you would like to add?
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think as machine learning, for example, gets much more mature, the requirement on people is going to be to add in judgment. Yeah, and that's something that machines can't come close to at this point, and it's going to increase that. You call it strategic thinking, but it can be very simple, just like a judgment of whether this is the right call or not. Yeah. And I think there's something else. The other big thing that I think is going to be happening very soon for people, and we're already seeing it in some markets, especially for outsourcing, is the coming war for talent, and this is going to affect every industry where job location is optional, right? Yeah. There's tons of jobs, and we're all in those jobs, right? Working from home right now. We're all at our. I don't know. Ameet, are you at home? Or are you at the office? I don't know.
I'm at the office today.
Yeah.
I don't want any the Wi-Fi or whatever. So
yes, yeah, right. So, but for many of us, like, we're spending most of our time working at home, and in any job function where that's the case, that it's now just totally possible to work for a company that is not geographically anywhere near you, and so this is going to mean a massive grab for individual talent, and and I think it will rival anything that I've seen in my career, including the .com boom and all of that. And I think that that's going to really drive that. Finding folks like Ameet was referring to is going to get much tougher and much more expensive in the next 6 months, year, however long, as we come out of this pandemic. And because all we need to do is change 5% of jobs to be able to be remote. That's all it would take to totally shuffle the deck, and it may be much more than that.
It's a really great point.
It's an interesting point, right? I found somebody, in Indonesia that I thought would be a perfect fit for our company and for my team. And my employer said, how are we gonna have somebody employed by Deloitte, working in Indonesia, supporting clients globally? There's all these restrictions that we have around data, residency, blah, blah, blah. We got to figure that out quickly.
Yes.
Because that's the future. The future is allowing people to work wherever in the world they want to work, right? Including the beach in Barbados, wherever, right? And be able to handle their requirements. The other thing that I'm always interested about is, and I've started to ask that of my teams, right? I know you're brilliant with numbers, technology, whatever, but I want to give me an example of when you were kind, compassionate, and worked in an environment where you had to demonstrate a high level of empathy. So important. Of today's generation, the young people care about that more than anything else. So I'm always asking those questions, and they're like, this is not supposed to be part of your behavioral interview checklist, but I want to know what kind of person that is, right? Because that's so important in this remote world, to be able to be kind, compassionate, loving, and all of those things that people don't care about. They just assume that you are, right?
Yep. I love that, and I want to end on that note.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on, for sure.
Yes, very, very great topic. So really good discussion today. Really appreciate, thank you everyone for sharing your insights with me and our audience today. Really appreciate the time that we spent, and join us again for our next episode of Workday Chats.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.